Hey guys, how are you all doing? Welcome to another important episode here at Learn with Anirudh. And on this one, we are going to be understanding a very critical concept, something which is very important for your interviews, which is number pattern printing program. So let us dive right in and take a look at all of that. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, now before we get started, I want to ask you guys if you have had a chance to hit that subscribe button, because if you haven't, do take a second to hit that subscribe button because your support definitely means the world to me. And as you can see from your screen, over 45.7% of you have subscribed, while 54% of you all watching this haven't subscribed yet. So let's get that number down. I'm looking forward to your subscription. Now, before you watch this particular episode, ladies and gentlemen, I have another episode on pattern printing which you already might have seen on the channel right now. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at this, do watch this episode because we did cover a lot of important stuff, such as why pattern printing is important, how to print any pattern, how to simplify the process of printing any pattern out there. We discussed a very important debugging trick that'll help you understand any pattern, and eventually we took a look at all the star pattern printing programs which are very critical for all your interviews. So if you haven't had a chance to watch this episode, do watch that. Right, and now coming to this one, let's dive right into the heart of the concept. Let us start writing code in Python. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'll be writing code in Google Colab. Google Colab is a free Jupyter notebook that is hosted on the Google Cloud platform. If you have a Gmail account, it is free to use. And this entire Jupyter notebook that I'll be showing you right now will be available for free in the description box below. There is a link there. So make sure you guys are checking that out. It'll bring you to the exact same page that I'll have open throughout this tutorial. So right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started with Google Colab. Let me quickly open it and we can start writing code. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, I've opened up Google Colab out here and we can get started with this number pattern printing. And as always, I'm going to make it as simple as possible for all of you all. Now, we're going to be discussing 5 patterns. Here's the first one. This is basically a number table, as you can see on your screen. Take a look at this. Anything multiplied with 1 is 1, so no need to put anything on the right side. But anything multiplied with 2 goes on, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Similarly, the 3 table. Now, 3 multiplied with 3 is again 9. You can see it on the third row. 3 multiplied with 2 is 6. So, the 3 table is going on 3, 6, 9, 12. Similarly, for the 4 table, 4, 8, 12, 16 and 5, 10, 15, 20. So, we have table from 1 all the way to table number 5. Now, if you're asked this in an interview, how do you go about writing this particular program? Let me actually go about showing you. See, first of all, how many rows are there? We need to define what rows we have, right? So we have rows, we have 5 rows, pretty simple. Now, after you have the 5 rows, you have to make sure Python moves from the first row all the way to the 5 rows, right? So for I in range of 1 to rows plus 1. Now, why rows plus 1, ladies and gentlemen? This is because of the fact that Python always indexes from 0. When it indexes from 0, you have to make sure you have to account for the extra row. Alright, now after we've moved all this data and we have to make sure that Python goes from the first row to the second row, we need to tell it to do what to print in each column. Now, if you do not know the logic that I'm speaking of, make sure to watch the pattern printing program of the star pattern episode that I've discussed, right? Okay, now Python will move through the first element all the way to the last element. It is going to move from 1 to 5. Now I have to make it move from 2 to 4, 3 to 6. I have to make it move horizontally, not just vertically. So for this, we're going to require another loop. Here we're going to have a j loop for j in range. Now, range from what? We already have our first row and we need to make sure that we move based on what I is doing. If I is in the second row, make sure that you print 2 elements. If I is in the third row, make sure you're printing 3 elements. If I is in the fourth row, 4 elements, so on, right? Fantastic. Now, we're moving through the rows, we're moving through the columns, but where is the logic? The heart of the logic lies where we need to multiply the ith row with the jth column for that particular case. Now, let me show you what I mean by this. So basically, we're going to take I, we're going to multiply it with j. So this is telling you that in the second row, it is the 2 table. In the third row, it is the third table. In the fourth row, it is the fourth table, right? And of course, we need to make sure we need to have the end statement as well. Now, again, if you do not know why we have the end statement, ladies and gentlemen, please do watch the particular episode that we just discussed. And after this, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we can print another line so that we can end it whenever we want. Now, look at this. This is pretty much you never missed the colon there. I missed a quick colon, right? So as you can take a look at it, with just about 4 or 5 lines of code, we can go about printing the exact same pattern out there. Now, what you see there is a simple line where there are no spaces in between. So just add the space between the end. And as you can see, this is how you code in real time. This is how you make sure that you can understand this program and find out. See, the way you work with these pattern printing programs is to make sure you figure out what the pattern wants you to do and figure out how you would get Python to do this for you guys, right? Now, fantastic. Let's take a look at the second pattern. The first pattern is done. Similarly, for the second pattern, it says there are numbers up to 10. This is a different pattern. Look at this. You have 1, second row 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you have numbers up until 10 and it is going in a vertical manner followed by a horizontal manner. See, after 2, you go to 3. As soon as you go to 3, for every single row number, the elements are similar, right? Now, since this is a half pyramid, the second row should have only 2 elements. The third row should have only 3 elements. The fourth row should have only 4 elements, as you can see from your screen. Now, what is the logic here? Well, first of all, we need to figure out what is our starting number, right? So let's have a variable called start number. In our case, I want to start this with 1 and go all the way up until 10. So how many rows do we have here? We have 4 rows, right? So let us go about declaring the 4 rows there. And we're going to have one more variable called stop. Stop is telling us, hey, as soon as you reach the variable 10, as soon as you reach the number 10, make sure that you're stopping and not overshooting, even though your row limit might be crossed, right? Okay, now we have start number equal to 1. We have 4 rows, stop equal to 2. My bad, right? Fantastic. Now, after this, what do? We need to make sure Python moves in between each of these ranges, right? Now, for I in range of what you can do it manually, you can do it automatically. In this case, I've called it as rows, so you can have it as rows. And eventually make sure that you guys are not forgetting the indentation out here. And this is for the rows, moving through the rows. Now we need something for the column as well. So for column in range of 1 all the way to stopping, right? So we're telling Python, hey, from the first till the last, you need a way to move. So use this as your guide for that. Now after this, we're going to get in another indentation because we want both rows and columns for our print statement. Because here in the print statement, we're going to go from the first number, which is what? Start underscore num. And we're going to make sure that we get a free space everywhere we go about it, right? And end is declared. Now this is done. So what do we need to do? If you just print it as it is, you're just going to get once printed all over. So you have to make sure you have to increment the starting number by 1 every single time you move through this loop. So start num plus equal to 1 is basically incrementing it by 1 every single time. Now after this, what do? We need to have a print statement here with the print statement to make sure that we're moving through each of these lines and moving away as well. Now the stop is equal to 2 right now, but at the end of the day, if you just print it out like this, it's not going to give you a valid output. See, it's going to give you a syntax error. Now this syntax error is not related to that. Let me just hit play again. And as you can see, it says 1, 2, 3, 4 here. Now this is not what we want. The desired effect, what we want is to make sure that we stop through the half pyramid pattern. So you have to increment stop everywhere you go as well. Stop plus equal to 1. Now as soon as I hit play on this, look at that. Look at how one line, important line, right? Look at how one line can mess up your entire program. People can do all of this perfectly, and in an interview, if you just skip this, you will not know what is going on. So don't mug up these programs. These are extremely simple programs to work with, and at the end of the day, as you can see, it's pretty simple for yourself. Now let me just minimize pattern number 2. Let's go about discussing pattern number 3. Okay, so pattern number 3 is a palindrome pattern. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all of you all should know what palindrome is. If you read it from the left side and reverse it from the right side, it should be the same. Look at this. 1 is a palindrome in itself because it's only one position. 1, 2, 1 is a palindrome because either way you write it, it's still the same. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, palindrome, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, yes. So all of these are palindromes. Now, how do you go about printing a palindrome program such as this when you're asked in an interview? Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is very, very simple. I know some of you all might think that, hey, this looks very, very complex, but it actually is not. As always, how many rows do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we have 5 rows here, ladies and gentlemen. Now, after your 5 rows are completed, in fact, Python does it from 0, so we can actually have 6 rows out here, and we need to have the I loop. Why do we have the I loop? The I loop makes sure that Python can go about moving from one particular row, the first row, all the way to the last row. Don't miss that colon. I've already missed it twice. Now for j in range of 1 to, where are we going here? Now 1 to I minus 1 should be our loop. Now why I minus 1? Now, whenever you have questions where you're not understanding why we need to move Python in a certain range through which we're going to be moving through the columns here, look at this. The second row here does not necessarily should not have two columns. If you only have two columns, it will not make any sense. It will not become a palindrome unless it's 1, 1, 2, 2, unless it's exactly the same numbers. So to make sure your Python interpreter understands that, hey, it's okay, even for every single column, there need not be the same number of rows as the equal number of columns there, we just move it by 1. Now, we have 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. So we need to make sure we progress it forward and reverse the loop back. First of all, let's have a print statement here. In this particular print statement, we're going to make sure that we have the print capability of this particular loop out here. So we're going to have the J statement out here. Done. Now, as it is, this will not work because it will not understand the logic between that. So we need to write the logic loop. Now, the logic loop is for j in range of I minus 1, and go from I minus 1, go all the way to 0. And while you're doing that, make sure you're not incrementing it. Now, why do you not have to incrementing it? Because once you cross through the halfway point, what is happening? You're just printing it in reverse. So make sure that you're using a decrement loop to go about printing that. Now, after this, we need to make sure we print the other element, or else only half of your loop will be printed. So ladies and gentlemen, just simply print j, and again, make sure you have the right spacing available. Just print end, and at the end of the day, we're gonna give it a simple print statement, right? Now, how many lines of program is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Ladies and gentlemen, 7 lines of code. We can get the exact same pattern that you can see on the screen. Now, the logic you need to figure out is this is what tells Python about how you're supposed to print it after reversing the elements. This is how you tell Python about moving from the first row to the last row. The jth loop at the end of the day will make sure that you're not only just going through the elements, but appropriately giving Python the access to specific elements in each of the column. This is very important for all of you all to understand. Right now, again, another 5-6 lines of code. We are done with the palindrome pattern as well. How simple is this? Now, let me move on to pattern number 4. Pattern number 4 looks interesting. It's called as the row reduction pattern. Basically, as you can see, all the way from the first element to the last element, we are not increasing the loop right now. We are doing what? We're decreasing the loop. Now, you can already guess at this point of time that there should be a very, very simple program. So how many rows do we have here, ladies and gentlemen? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have 5 rows. Let me just set the parameter to rows equal to 5. Now, after rows equal to 5, what are you going to do? Well, we need Python to make sure that it can run through each of these. Can run from 0 all the way to it starts from 0, so we have to make sure we not use rows. We have to make sure we have to use rows plus 1, and every time incremented by 1. Right now, I loop is set. Now, j loop will be depending on I, right? So for j in range of what? In range of I plus 1, ladies and gentlemen, plus of I plus 1. And you do not have to put as rows right now, because if you put as rows, it will be incorrect. You have to make sure it has rows plus 1, because again, we're starting it from 0 in the first loop and incremented by how much? Incremented by 1 every single time. You can have a space there, not have a space there, would not matter. And after this, we already have our pattern, and Python already understands that it has to come through this particular pattern. So all you need to do is go about printing it, j comma end, and give it the spacing out there. Put in a print statement, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ladies and gentlemen, 5 rows, 5 lines worth of program, and we have the exact same logic, right? So as you can see, the last element here, all we're trying to do is every time you move through a row, you're just skipping the first element. See, first row has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the second row, just remove 1. You have 2, 3, 4, 5. After that, just remove 2. In the next line, you have 3, 4, 5. Remove 3. You have 4, 5. Remove 4. You have 5. Pretty simple, right? Now, this pattern is again a very simple pattern, but this logic I plus 1 and rows plus 1 is something that you have to keep in mind. Now, there are many ways you can go about working with the same logic, but in my opinion, I found this to be the simplest way to explain it for you guys, right? Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're done with 4 patterns right now. Let us come to the 5th pattern. The 5th pattern is the number doubling pattern, where your number doubles on each of the column that's out there. Look at this. First row, first column of the entire the pattern that we have is going to be all zeros, and after that we have 0 and 1. Okay, we're not getting a pattern anymore, so move to the next line. 0, 2, 4. We have the 2 table. Move to the next line. 0, 3, 6, 9. 0, 4, 8, 12, 16. Okay, so this is the 1 table, the 2 table, the 3 table, the 4 table, and eventually you can go on until whatever table that you please. So how do we go about doing this? First of all, how many rows do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So ladies and gentlemen, rows equal to 5 should be the first thing. And what is the next line? We need to make sure Python moves through each of these. For I in range of 0, okay, in this case we're going to have it all the way to 0 to rows, and eventually we're going to need to have a j loop for j in range of, okay, so now what are we going to move the j through? So every time it has to go through 1 and it has to start doubling it. The doubling logic will come later, but right now we need to make sure it moves from 1 to the end. So j and I plus 1 go all the way from 0 all the way to I plus 1. This is telling me that, hey, for every single row number 2 has 2 elements, row number 3 has 3 elements, row number 4 has 4 elements, and so on. This is the logic, 0 to I plus 1. Now after that we need to multiply each of these with that. So print I multiplied with j, and make sure your end variable, your end statement is set as well. And after this, give the outer loop a print statement so that it can go about printing. Let me hit the play button and we should get the exact same loop. As you can see, the exact same pattern. Now if you're wondering, hey, isn't this the very similar one that we already did? Let me go to the one that we already did. Look at this. Here we made sure that our pattern table was very different. Right now, let me copy this code for you guys. Let me bring it to the bottom here as well. Now ladies and gentlemen, compare all of this. What difference do you see? The only difference here is we're starting here every row compulsorily from 0. Now this is the older program, right? This is the older program, and here as you can see, the newer program we're going from 0 to rows, and here we're going from 1 to rows plus 1, and eventually all the even with the range function you're starting from 0. Here there we started with 1, and everything else, look at these two lines, the logic line is pretty much the same, right? So ladies and gentlemen, with this, we've come to the end of the short demonstration where you can print these pattern programs all by yourself. These are really simple, and I bet that all of you all can go about doing this very easily. Now let me quickly get back to our presentation so we can conclude this quick episode. So ladies and gentlemen, as you saw, pattern printing in Python is very simple. Now if you have followed through my other episode where we discussed a tool called Thorny, it is almost like a cheat code. It almost makes it the most easiest way to write these pattern printing programs. And whenever I see you guys as freshers, beginners trying to mug up these programs, after using my methodology of trying to debug it while writing your code, understanding why Python is doing the things that it does, ladies and gentlemen, I promise you, you will never have to debug another pattern printing program ever. Running through one loop is very simple, but when you bring the second loop where the j loop also plays around with the ith variable there, that is when things slightly get complex, I understand. But whenever you run through it, whenever you start debugging it, write pseudocode, right, follow the program from the first line all the way to the last line, just like how Python would do it, and you will understand it. And I bet at the end of it, ladies and gentlemen, you will not have to mug up any single pattern printing program ever. So ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this episode, do take a second to like the episode, and of course hit that subscribe button. With your support, I can help reach a lot more learners just like you. And of course, there's a lot more content coming your way. To make sure that you do not miss out on any of these, I would highly recommend you guys subscribe to the channel. Now with that, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you're taking a look at these two videos that you see on your screen right now. These two episodes are really important for you. And again, thank you so much for your support. Make sure you're checking these out while I see you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.